If you had asked me a year ago what my life would look like now, I would have smiled and given you a simple answer. Maybe still working at the little cafe near my apartment. Maybe saving up for my own place. Maybe dating someone quiet and sweet. Someone my family would immediately approve of. I wasn't the girl who took risks. I wasn't the girl who made headlines. I lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone. We measured success by how stable your life looked. A steady job, a neat home, Sunday dinners with family. No surprises, no scandals. My parents worked hard to give me that kind of life, and in their eyes, stepping outside that invisible fence was dangerous, even selfish. I believed them, until the day my world cracked open. It started so quietly, so innocently, that even now I wonder if it was fate, or just a simple twist of chance. I was sent on a work trip, my first real one, to help organize a charity event in the city. It was a fundraiser for a children's hospital, sponsored by some big-name celebrities. My boss was nervous, fluttering around with clipboards and tight smiles, and I was just trying not to trip over the fancy rugs. That's when I saw him. At first, I didn't recognize him, not really. In real life, he looked different. Softer, warmer, not the polished, larger-than-life figure I'd glimpsed in magazines. He was just standing there by the refreshment table, trying to open a stubborn bottle of water, muttering under his breath and laughing at himself. And for some absurd reason, I laughed too. Out loud. He looked up, caught my eye and smiled. It should have ended there. A quick exchange, a polite chuckle, and then back to our separate worlds. But something shifted. He walked over, water bottle still in hand, and introduced himself with a name everyone knew, but somehow, in that moment, it didn't feel intimidating. It felt normal. Like meeting someone at the local grocery store. Like bumping into a neighbor you didn't realize you had. We talked. About little things. The bad coffee. The confusing schedule. The way neither of us really knew what we were supposed to be doing at that moment. And somehow, without planning it, we kept finding each other that evening. Shared glances across the room. Inside jokes whispered behind menus. Tiny, electric moments that made my heart hammer in my chest and my cheeks flush hot. When he asked for my number, I froze. Not because I didn't want to give it, but because I was terrified. Terrified of what my parents would say. Terrified of stepping outside the careful, ordinary life I'd built. Terrified of wanting something so wildly, recklessly different. But his smile, it was genuine. Not the polished, charming grin for cameras. It was shy, almost hopeful. So I said yes. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends. Not my family. It was my secret, tucked away like a fragile flower I was too afraid to show the world. For a while it was enough. The stolen phone calls, the quiet dinners in tiny, out-of-the-way restaurants where no one recognized him. The way he made me laugh, not just giggle, but belly laugh until I cried. The way he listened, really listened, to every small thing I said. For the first time in my life, I wasn't following a script. I was writing something new. And it terrified me, but it also made me feel more alive than I ever had before. I thought I could keep my two worlds separate forever. I thought wrong. For weeks, I lived two lives. By day, I was the same daughter my parents had always known, polite, dependable, predictable. I showed up for Sunday dinners, helped my mom with the dishes, listened to my father complain about the news, laughed along with my brothers at old family jokes. No one suspected a thing. And why would they? I had never given them a reason to doubt me before. But inside, I was different. I would sneak glances at my phone under the dinner table, feeling my heart skip every time his name flashed across the screen. I would lie awake at night, replaying our conversations, the way he made me feel seen, not as someone's daughter, someone's sister, but just as me. I wasn't trying to hide him out of shame. I was trying to protect something delicate and precious, something I knew, deep down, they wouldn't understand. But secrets have a way of growing heavy. It wasn't fair to him, and it wasn't fair to me. I didn't want to live in hiding. I wanted to be proud. I wanted to share my happiness, the way I would if he were anyone else. If he had a normal job, a normal life, a normal name that wouldn't cause my parents' faces to freeze into masks of disapproval. I chose a Sunday afternoon. Late summer. The kind of lazy day when the windows were open, the air smelled like cut grass, and the world felt forgiving. Maybe, I told myself they would surprise me. We were all gathered in the backyard, sitting around the old wooden table my dad had built years ago. Mom had just brought out lemonade and slices of peach pie. Everyone was relaxed, joking, passing plates around, the way we always did. I waited until the conversation lulled. My hands were sweating. I wiped them on my jeans under the table. "I have something to tell you," I said. 6 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My mom smiled. "You look so serious." "What is it, honey?" I swallowed hard. "I'm seeing someone." A beat of silence. Then smiles, teasing, nudging each other. My brother made a mock wolf whistle. "About time," my dad said, chuckling. I laughed nervously. Maybe this would go better than I thought. "Who is he?" my mom asked, leaning forward. I hesitated just a second too long. It's James." I said his last name, quietly, almost whispering it. For a moment, they didn't react. Just blinking faces. And then my brother, the first to put it together, let out a low whistle, a real one this time, but not a playful one. An incredulous one. "You mean that James?" he said. My father's face darkened. My mother's hands stilled on the tablecloth. "The actor," she said, her voice rising slightly. I nodded, my throat tight. Dead silence. The kind of silence that falls when something precious has just been dropped and shattered on the floor. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the deck. He paced a few steps away, then turned back toward me, his face thunderous. "Is this some kind of joke?" he demanded. "No," I said, barely above a whisper. "I'm serious. We've been seeing each other for a few months now." My mother pressed her fingers to her lips, like she was trying to physically hold back words she didn't want to say out loud. My brother muttered something under his breath. My sister-in-law just stared at me like I'd grown another head. "You don't know people like that," my father said, voice shaking now, not from fear but from fury. "They chew girls like you up and spit them out. You're nothing to them." I flinched like he'd struck me. "You think you're special," he continued. "You're not. You're just another toy to him. Another distraction until he moves on to the next one." "That's not true," I said, my voice cracking. "You don't even know him." "And you think you do," my mother finally exploded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You think because he smiles at you and says nice things that it means anything? Honey, wake up. This isn't a fairy tale. This isn't real life." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. The words I had practiced, the defenses I had rehearsed in my mind, all of them vanished like smoke. "You are embarrassing us," my father said, low and bitter. "You are throwing away everything we raised you to be." It was like watching a dam break. Years of pride, fear, disappointment, all of it spilling out of them at once. "You think you know better than us now? You think fame makes you important? You're chasing a fantasy. You'll regret this. And when you do, don't come crying back." Every word hit me like a slap. I stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling smaller and smaller with every second. Feeling like a little girl again, standing in front of people whose approval had meant everything to me for as long as I could remember. And realizing, for the first time, that maybe I had already lost them. Maybe I had lost them the second I chose myself. After that Sunday afternoon, nothing was ever the same. 4 days, I couldn't escape the sharp, heavy silence that lingered in my house. It was as though a thick fog had settled around us, clouding every conversation, every glance. When I walked into the kitchen, my mother would quickly look away. My father would mumble something under his breath, like a prayer for the world to make sense again. My brothers were no help, either, just as uncomfortable as the rest of us, unsure of how to navigate the new, fractured version of our family. I wanted to talk to them, to explain what they couldn't seem to understand. I wanted to shout that James was more than just an actor, more than just some figure they saw on TV. But how could I explain what I couldn't even fully understand myself? There was a part of me, deep inside, that feared I'd lost them for good. But the other part of me, the part that had found something so pure, so undeniable in James, refused to let go. He wasn't the fantasy they painted him to be. He wasn't the man they feared. He was just him. And with him I felt seen. I felt heard. I felt alive. But the world outside of my family didn't see it that way. After our first real argument, after the disappointment in my parents' eyes, I found myself back in the spotlight, facing a world that didn't care about my family's opinions. It cared about one thing: him. When James and I went public, it wasn't a choice we made lightly. It was like everything was happening so fast, and there was no way to stop it. Paparazzi caught us leaving the same restaurant on a quiet Thursday night, and within hours, the rumors started. Not just the usual celebrity dating gossip, but questions that dug deeper. Questions about me, about my past, about my life before him. It was overwhelming. One afternoon, I was walking through the city, trying to clear my head. I just left my therapist's office, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. I didn't want to be in the public eye. I didn't want to be the center of attention. But every time I stepped outside, it felt like I was thrust into this new reality, a reality I wasn't ready for. I heard the cameras first, a faint clicking sound. Then I saw them. Paparazzi hiding behind parked cars, crouched behind trees, with their cameras trained on me. A few brave ones approached, their lenses clicking with relentless speed. "How's it feel dating a man who's always in the headlines?" one of them shouted. Another camera flashed, blinding me for a second. "Is he treating you well? Or are you just another conquest?" Each question felt like a needle to the chest. I tried to ignore them, tried to keep walking with my head held high. But the weight of the spotlight was crushing, and every glance in my direction felt like a judgment. I felt his hand on my arm before I saw him. "Hey, it's okay. Let's go." James's voice was soft but firm, pulling me away from the cameras, away from the chaos. His presence was both a comfort and a curse. As much as I wanted to lean into him, to let him shield me from the storm, I also couldn't help but wonder, is this what I signed up for? We retreated to his car, and as the paparazzi grew distant, I let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice small. "I'm not used to this." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached out and gently cupped my face, his thumb brushing across my cheek. "I know. I'll protect you, but you have to understand, this is part of the deal. You can't have me without this." I nodded, though the reality of it felt like a distant ache I wasn't sure I could ever fully process. He looked at me, his gaze intense. "But it's not just about the cameras, you know. It's about what's real, and you are real to me." I wasn't sure if he could feel the same anxiety rising inside me. The fear that everything I had known, everything I had built, was being torn apart by the constant attention, by the growing pressure, by the very thing that was supposed to be a dream come true. I wanted to believe in him, in us. But the world outside was turning everything upside down. That evening, as we sat in his living room, I stared out at the skyline of the city. The bright lights shimmered, but to me, they felt cold, distant. "What do you think?" he asked softly, his voice low and uncertain. About all of this, I didn't have a good answer. How could I? The truth was I was scared. Scared of losing myself in this world that wasn't my own. Scared of what my family would think, of what they'd say if they saw me now. The pressure of their disapproval weighed so heavily on my heart that sometimes I felt like I couldn't breathe. "I don't know," I whispered, the words barely escaping. "I love you. I do. But I don't know if I can keep up with this. I don't know if I can handle the constant eyes on me, the whispers behind my back, the judgment." James's expression softened. He pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around me, offering a refuge that, in that moment, felt more like a lifeline. "You don't have to handle it alone," he said. "We'll face it together, okay? If it gets too much, we'll figure it out. But don't ever think you have to carry this weight by yourself." And for a fleeting moment, in his arms, I believed him. I believed that maybe, just maybe, everything would work out. But deep down, a voice kept whispering, what if it doesn't? The next few weeks were a blur of constant media coverage, some supportive, but most critical. People had so many questions. Was I dating him for the fame? Was I just another social climber using him to get ahead? I began to notice the subtle changes in how people treated me. Friends I'd known for years now eyed me with caution. Strangers in the street whispered behind their hands. Even the waiters at my favorite cafe looked at me differently, as though they saw something foreign in me now. And all the while, my family kept their distance. I called them once or twice, but the conversations always ended too quickly, too awkwardly. My mother, once so warm, now barely spoke to me. My father's disapproval hung heavy in the air every time I visited, and I began to wonder if I'd ever be able to bridge the gap between the life I'd chosen and the life they had always wanted for me. There were times when I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, torn between two worlds. I knew there was no going back. I knew I could never unsee the things I had learned, never unknow the person I had become with James. But could I ever reconcile this new version of myself with the person they wanted me to be? The tension in the air grew thicker with each passing day. It wasn't just the cameras. It wasn't just the whispers in public. It was something deeper, something I couldn't quite name, but something that had begun to gnaw at the edges of my life like a slow, relentless tide. I'd never realized how fragile everything I had known was until it all started to unravel. I had always been the kind of person who kept her head down. I didn't like the spotlight. I didn't like the noise. Growing up, I'd been content to blend in, to remain unnoticed. It wasn't that I was shy. I just preferred the quiet, the familiarity of home, and the comfort of being surrounded by people who understood me without the scrutiny of the world hanging over me. But now, it was as if every aspect of my life had been put under a microscope. Every small detail was picked apart, scrutinized by strangers, by people who didn't know me, but felt entitled to an opinion on my choices. I had thought I was ready for this. I had told myself that love was worth it, that being with James was worth any price, any sacrifice. But now, every moment felt like a battle. The first sign of how far things had gone came one evening when James and I were at a private event, one of those exclusive gatherings that people like us were supposed to attend. He was charming, as always, laughing with his colleagues, shaking hands with the industry elites who adored him. I was there, standing by his side, pretending to be at ease. But inside, I felt like a stranger. That night, the press were everywhere. Photographers were snapping pictures of everyone, hoping to catch some off-guard moment or scandalous angle. I was used to it by now, or at least I thought I was. But as the night wore on, I began to realize something chilling. The cameras weren't just for James. They were trained on me, too. A photographer approached us as we made our way toward the exit. He was older, his face lined with years of experience chasing after stars. His camera clicked like a gunshot, each flash burning into my retinas. "Hey," he called out. "What does it feel like to date a man who can't keep his hands off other women?" I froze, the words like a slap to the face. My stomach churned with nausea, my hands shaking slightly at my sides. James stiffened beside me, his expression instantly turning hard. "That's enough," he said, his voice low, but unmistakably commanding. The photographer just laughed. "What? You think the public doesn't know? We all see the rumors. You're just another step on his ladder to fame, sweetheart. Don't kid yourself." Before I could react, James was already pulling me away, his grip firm but gentle as he guided me out of the crowd and into the quiet of the parking lot. I could hear the photographer's mocking laughter behind us, but it felt so distant, so insignificant compared to the emotional storm building inside me. "Are you okay?" James asked, his voice tight with concern. I wanted to tell him I was fine, that I could handle it, but the truth was I wasn't fine. I wasn't even close to being fine. "I'm not sure anymore," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. James led me to the car, and we sat in silence for a long time. The night air was cool, but the weight of what had just happened pressed down on me like an invisible force. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout at the world for judging me, for assuming they knew everything about me, about us. But instead, I just sat there, breathing in the cool air, trying to calm the racing thoughts in my mind. "Let's go home," James said after a while, his voice softer now. "You don't need to deal with this anymore tonight." I nodded, grateful for his presence, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, that this was no longer just about love. It had become something far more complicated, far more painful than I had ever imagined. That night, when we finally got back to his place, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, the harsh words of the photographer echoing in my head. Just another step on his ladder to fame. What if he was right? I pushed the thought away, but it kept creeping back. The fear that I was just another part of the machine, that my love for James wasn't enough to protect me from the mess of the public eye, from the criticism and judgment, from the constant need to prove myself to people who didn't matter. The next few days were a blur. We barely spoke, though we were together almost every moment. There was no time to process anything, no time to really talk about what had happened. The press were still circling us, still eager for the next big scandal. And behind the scenes, my family continued to stay silent, refusing to acknowledge me or my relationship. Every attempt to reach out to them ended in disappointment. My mother's voice on the other end of the phone was cold, distant, as if she were a stranger. "I don't know what you want me to say," she said, her words clipped. "You've made your choices and we've made ours. I can't support this." I wanted to beg her to understand, to tell her how much I missed her, how much I missed us. But all I could do was listen as she hung up the phone, her decision final. My father didn't even pick up when I called. I felt completely alone. James noticed, of course. He always noticed when something was off. But there was nothing he could do to fix this, nothing he could do to bring my family back to me. He was right there beside me, holding my hand, but even that couldn't fill the emptiness that was growing inside me. In the days that followed, I began to feel the pressure building, not just from the media, not just from my family, but from myself. I had crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. I didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't know how to fix this. All I knew was that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The world was watching, and it wasn't just James's life in the spotlight anymore. It was mine, too. The days began to feel like weeks, each one blending into the next as I struggled to keep my footing. Every morning, I woke up to the same feeling of dread, the knowledge that my world was falling apart, piece by piece. I couldn't escape it. The weight of it all was suffocating. James was trying. I could feel his concern, his constant presence. He was there for me, always, in ways that felt both comforting and crushing. But there was only so much he could do. He couldn't fix the damage that had already been done. He couldn't undo the choices I'd made or the distance that had grown between me and the people who had once been my entire world. It wasn't just the press anymore, either. The media was a constant storm, a backdrop to the reality of my life that had become unrecognizable. Every tabloid had some new headline. Some speculated that I was just another gold digger trying to climb my way up. Others said I was naive, living in the shadow of a celebrity who would discard me as easily as he picked me up. Each headline felt like a blow to the gut, every new rumor eating away at whatever remained of my dignity. They all assumed they knew me. They assumed they knew my motives, my life, my heart. But none of them knew the truth. None of them saw what I was living with, the constant emotional toll this was taking. But what hurt more than anything wasn't the media. It wasn't the press, or the rumors, or even the endless pictures that seemed to invade every corner of my life. What hurt most was the silence from my family. The phone calls stopped. The messages were gone. I hadn't heard from my mother or father in weeks. I had sent them texts, left messages, reached out again and again, desperate for some sign that they still cared, that they still saw me as their daughter. But all I got in return was the cold, deafening quiet. And the pain of it was like a weight on my chest, suffocating me slowly. How could they do this to me? How could they turn their backs on me when I needed them the most? It was late one evening when I finally broke. I had been sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I saw a picture flash across my screen. A photo of me, taken while I was walking into a cafe with James, both of us laughing carefree. At first, I couldn't understand what was wrong with it. But as I read the caption, my heart sank. Is this the face of a woman in love, or a woman who's made a dangerous mistake? Will she regret it when the fame fades, and all that's left is the man behind the mask? I couldn't stop myself. I threw my phone across the room, the screen shattering on impact. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I was still. The reality of everything that had been happening, everything I'd been running from, came crashing down on me all at once. The anger, the sadness, the guilt, they all mixed together, a storm inside me that I couldn't control. James was already at my side in an instant, kneeling beside me. His hands were gentle, but there was a sharpness to his eyes that told me he was worried. Hey, it's okay," he whispered, but I could hear the strain in his voice. "It's not okay," I snapped, my voice shaking with the weight of everything I was feeling. "It's not okay, James. None of this is okay. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when I'm losing everything that mattered to me. He didn't speak at first. He just held me, his warmth a stark contrast to the cold emptiness I felt inside. I clung to him, needing something real to anchor me in the chaos. But the longer I held on, the more I realized that nothing would be the same again. "I just wanted you to be happy," he said, his voice soft but filled with regret. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I wanted to protect you, but I don't know if I've done that." I pulled back from him, shaking my head. "You can't protect me from my family, James. You can't protect me from them hating me for loving you. You can't protect me from the fact that I've lost everything." He opened his mouth to speak, but I stopped him. "You don't get it. You never will," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They've made their choice, and so have I. And now, all I'm left with is the question, was it worth it?" The words hung in the air between us, thick with the weight of everything we hadn't said before. Was it worth it? Was the love I had for him worth losing my family? Was it worth the constant pressure of the public eye? Was it worth the daily barrage of judgment and criticism? I didn't know. I didn't have the answers, and maybe I never would. The next few days were a blur of emotions, of unresolved arguments, of me trying to rebuild a life that felt like it had been shattered into a million pieces. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my family's faces, their disappointment, their anger. I saw their refusal to accept me, to accept my choices. I saw their pain, too, and it was worse than any headline or photo could ever be. One night, as I sat in the quiet of my apartment, I got a call. The familiar ringtone. It was my mother. My heart raced, the emotions rising within me in a flood. "Mom!" I answered, my voice tentative, unsure of what to expect. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, finally, her voice cracked through the stillness. I don't know what to say, but I can't keep doing this. I'm sorry." The tears welled up before I could stop them, flooding my eyes. It wasn't the apology I had hoped for, but it was something. Something that gave me a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could start to rebuild what had been broken. "I'm so sorry, honey," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know how we got here, but I want to make it right. I miss you. I miss you too," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. But even as I said those words, I knew that everything had changed. There was no going back. The bonds between us had been shattered, and it would take more than an apology to repair them. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep waiting for a love I wasn't sure I could have. I had to let go. The weeks that followed were a blur, a series of moments strung together by the quiet rhythm of life. It wasn't easy. Nothing about what I was going through felt easy. But each day, I learned something new about myself, about love, and about what it meant to move forward, even when it felt like there was no clear path ahead. The public's attention eventually began to shift. The noise that had once been deafening started to fade into the background. It wasn't that the rumors or the speculation had stopped, it was just that I had stopped letting them define me. I learned to ignore the whispers, to focus on the life I was building, even if it didn't fit the narrative everyone else had created for me. James and I, we were still together. Our relationship had faced challenges that neither of us had anticipated, but we had weathered them side by side. I won't say it was always easy. There were days when the weight of the world seemed too much to bear, and there were nights when I cried myself to sleep, haunted by the decisions I had made and the relationships I had lost. But through it all, James never wavered. He was there, unwavering, reminding me that love was not something to be afraid of, even when the world seemed to reject it. But something inside me had changed, too. I had learned to put myself first, to value my own happiness even when it meant standing alone. For so long, I had let the expectations of others dictate my choices. I had let their approval determine my worth. But I was done with that. It wasn't just about James anymore. It was about me, about finding the strength to heal and to rebuild the parts of myself that I had lost in the process of trying to please everyone else. My mother's apology had been a turning point, but it wasn't the end. It took time, but slowly we began to find our way back to each other. Our conversations were tentative at first, each word carefully chosen, as if we were both unsure of how to move forward. But as we spoke, As we shared our pain and our regrets, there was a quiet understanding that began to form between us. The love we had once shared was still there. It had just been buried under years of misunderstandings and unmet expectations. I remember the day my father called me. The phone rang late one evening, just as I was preparing to go to bed. His name flashed on the screen, and for a moment I just stared at it, unsure of what to do. It had been months since I'd heard from him, and the silence had been so painful. So much had been said in the absence of words. But now, here he was calling me. I answered the phone, my heart racing. "Dad! Honey, I've been thinking a lot about everything," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. I was wrong. It wasn't the grand gesture I had imagined, but it was enough. It was the beginning of a new chapter for us, a chance to rebuild what had been broken. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that this moment, this conversation, was the first step toward healing. As the days went by, I found myself learning to let go of the resentment that had built up inside me. I learned to forgive, not for them, but for me. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when I felt the sting of betrayal, when I questioned whether the price of love had been too high. But I learned to live with the uncertainty, to accept the pain as part of the process of moving forward. James and I talked about our future, about what we wanted, about where we saw ourselves in the years to come. We talked about the challenges that lay ahead, about the things we would have to face together. But most importantly, we talked about love. Not just the kind of love that was easy or convenient, but the kind that required vulnerability, trust, and patience. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. In the end, I realized that there was no such thing as a perfect family, a perfect relationship, or a perfect life. There were only imperfect people doing their best, trying to find their way through the chaos of the world. And in that mess, in that beautiful, chaotic mess, I had found my own path. I had found my voice, my strength, and my truth. And with James by my side, I was ready to face whatever came next. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that truly mattered was that I had chosen to live for myself, and that in itself was the greatest victory of all.